it still did not yield the kind of results the Raiders were paying for. So the Bengals didn't get the extra first-round pick, but they still absolutely fleeced them for a guy who was, traded to Arizona before too long. Welcome to Jungle, Bengals fans. I'm Kyle Phelps, and sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes, I feel a little bad that the Bengals were only really able to grow out of their own turmoil by sucking the life out of another franchise. I mean, not that bad. I feel a little bad. Of course, I'm talking about the potentially, absolutely franchise-changing trade that set up the Bengals for half a decade of being contenders, and the Raiders, well, it's the Raiders. They sucked anyway. So, I mean, maybe the curse of Bo Jackson backfired a little bit. I don't know. It just kind of seems like every time the Bengals level up, it's the Raiders who they kind of have to screw over, right? But I don't really care that much. Before we get into that, though, I'd just like to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. It really helps my channel grow, and it helps you know when all of my content comes out. So in the last episode of the Mike Brown saga that we're doing, we left off with the Houday Revolution. Probably my favorite of all of the movements that demanded that Mike Brown hire a general manager. The Bengals sort of half granted their wish, right? They gave Duke Tobin more power, but I think that's going to be the next episode. This one is about, obviously the Carson Palmer trade. It also helped, though, that the Bengals made possibly the best incoming personnel move of this time period until they drafted Joe Burrow in hiring Mike Zimmer as the defensive coordinator in 2008. Set up a really solid defense for the entire time Mike Zimmer was here, outside of that one season. But they ended up having a run of 6 playoff appearances over the course of the next 7 seasons. However, I say the best incoming personnel move because there was another move that trumped it entirely with an outgoing player, and that was the trade of Carson Palmer. While I'm sure Marvin and Duke were both influential in the execution of this absolute masterpiece, this all-time great trade was orchestrated by Mike Brown himself. Now, Carson was a game changer for the Bengals when he was drafted, to be fair, right? But by 2010, he'd become Bengalized. You saw it with that god-awful 2010 season that I just referenced a couple seconds ago that I actually personally only vaguely remember because I was lucky enough that my brain exploded and that whole time period is kind of lost for me. Like honestly, I like to believe that this happened because of that season. Actually, by the way, funny story about that, when I had my brain surgery, the first thing I said when I came out of the operating room was, I turned to my mom and I asked, did the Bengals make the Super Bowl? And she told me the Bengals won 4 games that year and the Steelers were in the Super Bowl. It was a rough time, guys. But wouldn't you know it, I got to watch Aaron Rodgers beat the Steelers in that Super Bowl while I was recovering. I choose to believe that my recovery, my very quick recovery for having, a brain explosion and brain surgery, I choose to believe that that was largely fueled by spite. Lord Sidious would be proud.
Good. Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Let the hate flow through you.
I could really go on and on about how I feel about Carson's exit in Cincinnati, but I won't for this video for the sake of staying on track and not putting out a half-hour-long video, right? But I think that Mike Brown felt about the same way. And as I said, I think he genuinely intended to let the man retire. However, what actually happened is Mike drove Carson's trade value through the roof. After all, he was just 31 years old at the time and one of the league's most talented quarterbacks. So teams were willing to pay a premium for a guy who the Bengals had under contract for another 4 years still. Now, I like to believe that Mike Brown knew exactly what he was doing letting Carson sit halfway through the season to create a sense of desperation among QB-needy teams. I mean, I know it was about morals. We're not going to let the player walk all over us. I just like to believe he was being a little savvy. But whether intentionally or unintentionally, Mike getting what could have been 2 first-round picks from the Raiders for a guy who's going to retire anyway, that's absolute highway robbery. It actually yielded a first and second round pick when all was said and done. That second round pick was a 2013 pick that was conditional, could have been a first round pick, on the condition of the Raiders making the AFC Championship. So basically the Raiders are saying, you know, if he makes the type of impact that we're giving up this kind of capital in the first place for, then we'll sweeten the pot a little bit. We'll put a little extra on top. So it didn't go that way. Things did not go well. I mean, the Raiders actually had like their best season in years with like, 8-8, but it still did not yield the kind of results the Raiders were paying for. So the Bengals didn't get the extra first round pick, but they still absolutely fleeced them for a guy who was, traded to Arizona before too long. At the end of the day, though, the Bengals managed to turn a retiring player into a first round pick in 2012 and a second round pick in 2013. Before the trade, but still knowing that Carson wasn't coming back, the Bengals drafted Andy Dalton and A.J. Green in 2011, and a new era was born. With that 2012 first-round pick, they selected Kevin Zeitler, a right guard who played 5 great years with the Bengals. Unfortunately, the sins of the front office led to him not sticking around afterward, but he's still one of the better guards in the NFL to this day. It's a damn shame that most of that production was not with the Bengals. But with the second round pick in 2013, the Bengals selected one of my favorite players of all time, Giovanni Bernard. Now, he never really secured the starting running back job in Cincinnati, like all the way, to be fair, but he was an instrumental locker room leader and was probably the best complimentary running back in the NFL for most of his career, if not all of his career in Cincinnati. Like I said, the Raiders ended up trading Carson a couple of years later after winning a grand total of 8 games in his 24 starts in Oakland. And they only got a 6th and a 7th round pick for him in return. In Carson's defense, he did actually have a pretty solid career revival in Arizona, where he actually won a playoff game before the Bengals ever figured out how to do that. The problem was that he absolutely melted down in the NFC Championship, and he threw 4 picks en route to a 49-15 beatdown by the Carolina Panthers. Still, though, that's farther than the Bengals ever got with him. But, as always, let me know what y'all thought of today's topic. Do you think that Mike deserves as much credit as I'm giving him for the Carson Palmer trade? Do you think that it was as instrumental as I'm making it out to be? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll feature the best ones in my next video, like this one from MV Pro Season, I think is how you pronounce that, who said, Mike Brown has really tried a lot. He was a younger man when he inherited the team. He knows a lot more now. They used to say he's the worst owner, but you can't say that anymore. And to be fair, those people weren't wrong. There was a time when Mike Brown was probably the worst thing to ever happen to this team. The reason that first video was so important, even though it was kind of mean, is because I think it's important to not forget how things actually happened. It was bad at first. But yes, I do agree. I think he's earned a redemption arc at this point, and that's really what we're going to get into for the rest of this series. But anyway, until then, y'all can always catch more of what I do at Kyle Phelps92 on Twitter, Facebook.com/ThePhelps, Butt Fumble Sports, the Battle of Ohio podcast on the Spot Pod Network, and right here if you subscribe. As a former Mike Brown hater, I gotta say, watching him win a Lamar Hunt trophy and lift that was awesome. I can't wait to see the day that he lifts a Lombardi. But until then, I'll leave y'all, as always, with a hootie!